Healthy soils are a foundation of healthy ecosystems. Soil, along with sunlight and climate, are basic building blocks. Soils provide food and habitat for organisms, as well as a medium for catching and storing water. What is a healthy ecosystem? What is a healthy soil? How does management affect ecosystems and soil health? This presentation will address these questions. First, let's look at a definition of soil. Forest soil is a mixture of minerals, organic matter, and voids through which water, gases, and organisms move and interact. The development, makeup, fertility, and condition of soil is strongly dependent on the breakdown of organic matter on the soil surface. Let's look at a few examples of ecosystems and their soils. Is this a healthy ecosystem? Does it have a healthy soil? Is this a healthy ecosystem? Is its soil healthy? What do you think about this ecosystem and its soil? How about this ecosystem? Is the soil healthy? Let's take a close look at the life of the soil. The healthy soil is reflected by its biology. Healthy soils support an abundant and diverse population of organisms, including those that cause disease and insects that we often consider harmful. This stylized ecosystem depicts by proportion the number of described species on Earth, or stated differently, the relative size represents the number of species. Note that the elephant represents all mammals. 80% of terrestrial species spend part or all of their life cycle in the soil. Let's take a quick look at some of the organisms that live in the soil. Birds, rodents, reptiles and amphibians, small mammals such as moles, shrews, and voles. The grubs of many insects. Many spend part or all of their life cycle in the soil. The ubiquitous ant, plus wasps and bees. Centipedes, the timber wolf of the soil world. Millipede, primary shredders of raw material. Arachnids are spiders. There are small ones, large ones. Pseudoscorpions. Earthworms. The larvae of many insects, such as this click beetle larva. The lowly sowbug or isopod. Dipleura. Mites, such as this turtle mite. Another turtle mite, or orobatid mite. They are microscopic and not visible to the naked eye. Nematodes, which are microscopic worms. Algae and protozoa. Many species of fungi. Actinomycetes. Bacteria and viruses, and plants. The list goes on and on. These organisms interact, and many depend on each other in some way. Many also exist in large numbers and multiply rapidly, so the soil is a very busy place. Soil is the foundation of terrestrial ecosystems and provides habitat for many organisms. Let's begin with an investigation of the organic matter portion of soil. Soil organisms cannot survive without organic matter. We will look at three types of organic matter: large woody material, duff and litter, and soil organic residues in the soil, or soil humus. The first is large woody material or down logs, which are the largest and most obvious source of organic matter and habitat on top of the soil surface. As these logs decay, they provide a habitat for a succession of many organisms that add, conserve, or convert nutrients within the ecosystem. There are a number of ways to classify decaying logs. We will use a system that has 5 classes. Class 1 are the recently fallen logs. Class 5 logs are in the final stages of decay. Class 2 through 4 logs are intermediate stages between 1 and 5. As the logs decay, they lose branches and bark, get in better contact with the soil, gain moisture, lose carbon, and eventually lose volume. We'll look at each class in a minute. First, let's look at the cross-section of a log. Logs are composed of outer bark, inner bark or cambium, sapwood, and heartwood. Sapwood decomposes rapidly. Heartwood decomposes slowly, and this provides persistent habitat. Large logs are good habitat for organisms since the heartwood to sapwood ratio is high. Let's take a look at just a few things that happen at each stage of decomposition. First, when a tree falls and loses its leaves or needles, water is no longer pumped out of the trunk. This graph, based on data from Oregon, shows that water content in the log increases as the log decays. In addition, because Oregon has wet winters and dry summers, the winter moisture is generally greater than summer moisture. The difference between winter and summer moisture is most pronounced in Class 4 and Class 5 logs. As the log decays, it acts more and more like a sponge, taking in more water. The presence of moisture speeds the decay process. But if the log becomes saturated, an overabundance of water restricts the amount of oxygen and decay slows down. Temperature also has an effect on the rate of decay. Biological activity is greatest during the summer months, provided adequate moisture is available. At the Class 1 stage, not much is happening for soils. The limbs and bark are intact, there is little contact with the soil, the log is drying out and cracking, which exposes new woody surfaces to attack by organisms, and moisture content is decreasing. The log remains in Class 1 stage for about 3 to 5 years. This is a stage of feverish activity by a multitude of organisms, such as burrowing insects. The insects penetrate the outer bark and mine the cambium and the outer sapwood, along with their symbiotic fungal partners. At the Class 2 stage, there is still not much happening for soils. The log has lost its limbs, but the bark is still intact. Moisture is still low, however, the log is beginning to make contact with the soil. The log is in Class 2 stage for approximately 5 to 15 years. At this stage, the log is increasing in biological activity. The outer bark is fully penetrated by organisms, and activity in the inner sapwood area is increasing greatly. Organisms in the log, such as grubs, provide a good food source for wildlife, including birds. At the Class 3 stage, things are really beginning to pick up for soils. The log is partially buried in the soil. It has a high moisture content and is becoming spongy, allowing it to take in water from rain, dew, and fog. The outer and inner bark is gone, and the sapwood is fully penetrated by organisms. The log may stay in Class 3 stage for 50 to 80 years. At this stage, species diversity and biological activity are rising rapidly. We'll look at just one species, the Pacific dampwood termite, one of the many species that converts large organic matter or cycles nutrients in the ecosystem. This is actually a symbiotic relationship of 3 organisms in one insect body. The protozoa secretes an enzyme which allows the termite to digest cellulose, which is an extremely difficult food source to break down. The bacteria living in the intestine are nitrogen fixers, which means that they have the unusual ability to use atmospheric nitrogen to make protein. When the termite dies, this protein is recycled for use by other organisms in the soil ecosystem, including roots of plants. These nitrogen-fixing bacteria slow down or speed up the process depending on needs. Although the amount of nitrogen fixed in termite colonies is not high, it is important in sustaining this part of the ecosystem. At the Class 4 stage, the log is down to 40% of its original solid volume. It is just cubical heartwood. 1/2 to 3/4 of the log is buried in the soil. It is very wet. Even after a very dry summer, you can actually wring water out of the log in the fall. The log may persist for over 100 years in this stage, and is occupied by many roots. Species diversity is near its maximum at the Class 4 stage, but much is microscopic and submicroscopic fungi and small arthropods, such as this orobatid mite. It is the log structure that is important at this stage since it provides habitat for these smaller species, especially fungi and small arthropods. There are many predator-prey relationships. Everyone is chowing down on everyone else and having a grand old time. And finally, at the Class 5 stage, the log is so much a part of the soil it is not readily observed. It is little more than a low mound on the forest floor, often missed without digging, even by experts. The log is all cubical heartwood, fully buried in the soil. It can have high moisture content and can be fully occupied by roots, and especially by mycorrhizal fungi. The mycorrhizae is a symbiotic relationship between the plant root rhizome and fungus. This compound structure greatly increases the effective rooting area of the plant. The tree supplies the mycorrhizae with sugar made by photosynthesis in the canopy, and the mycorrhizae supply the tree with nutrients. As much as 50% of the carbon fixed by trees can go into the mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae offer several benefits to the host plant, including faster growth, improved nutrition, greater drought resistance, and protection from pathogens. Benefits to the plant community, especially important in revegetation, are higher plant species diversity and improved soil structure. Most plants are mycorrhizal. That is, their roots are capable of developing a mutually beneficial relationship with certain fungi. In poor soils, it seems that mycorrhizae are absolutely essential for the survival and growth of the host plant. In western conifer forests, they can extend the root surface area for more than 1 million times, and they can occupy 2.5 tons per acre dry weight, or 11% of the total root mass. Soil wood, both in the soil and on the soil surface, is important habitat for the mycorrhizal fungi. Al Harvey from the Rocky Mountain Research Station in Moscow, Idaho, looked at root colonization by mycorrhizal fungi in 4 soil components the roots occurred in: humus, litter, soil wood, and mineral soil. Mineral soil comprises more than 90% of the total soil volume, but he found that mycorrhizal fungi occurred predominantly in the soil wood and humus, indicating that Class 5 heartwood is important habitat for mycorrhizal fungi, which in turn are important for healthy trees. Now that we have seen that as logs progressively decay, they provide habitat for a succession of organisms that carry out processes essential to the functions of ecosystems, let's look at residence time by decay class. Note that large woody material stays much longer in decay classes 3 through 5, the ones most important to soil organisms, than in classes 1 and 2. Therefore, you would expect a greater number of class 3 through 5 logs on the floor of a healthy forest. In summary, large woody material is vital habitat for a whole host of organisms that contribute to cycling nutrients in the forest ecosystem. The logs persist for a long time if undisturbed. This adds to the importance of not disturbing them. Our management should focus on protecting some of the class 3 and 4 logs and recruiting large logs that are mostly heartwood. Now let's look at the second type of organic matter, duff and litter. If you were a small critter trying to make a living in the soil, would you want to live here or here? Most would agree this is more suitable habitat for most soil critters. Let's take a look at why this is more desirable habitat. This desirable habitat comes in 3 types, each with slightly different properties and dynamics of cycling. The ground cover of dead branches, which is often seen under coniferous forests. The forest floor of decomposing leaves and needles. And grass litter, in which nutrients cycle quite differently. Most organic matter is added directly to the soil from dieback of fine grass roots, in contrast to being deposited on top of the soil. Next, we are going to cover several basic concepts about forest litter. Forest litter represents an equilibrium between the rate of litter fall and the rate of decomposition. When decomposition is slower than litter fall, litter depth increases. When it is faster, litter depth decreases. Where trees are removed, both the processes of litter accumulation and litter decomposition are affected. Removing logs, as in timber harvest, greatly decreases litter fall and may increase the decomposition rate because there is not as much to decompose due to increased weathering. If harvesting is done properly, the nutrients remaining are rapidly cycled and not lost from the ecosystem. But if the job is done without regard to preserving the habitat of the organisms responsible for recycling nutrients, environmental degradation can occur. By leaving some fine woody litter on the soil surface in mixed conifer, we can slow down the decomposition process and provide habitat for soil organisms. Another important concept about forest litter is that it provides mulch. This mulch modulates extremes in temperature and moisture to create desirable habitat. Most of these little guys, just like us, need air, water, a food source, and an environment that is not too cold or not too hot. This physical effect of duff and litter is fully as important as the nutrients it contains. Millipedes are the primary shredders of duff and litter, the teeth and molars of the soil organisms. They break down larger plant material, which enables other organisms to process the nutrients efficiently. As the organic matter goes through various stages of decomposition, some steps can be carried out by a large number of species, but other steps by only a few. These are called keystone species. Soil ecologists call millipedes a keystone species. The soil, especially at the soil litter interface, is very rich with many organisms. Soil can have up to 250,000 mites in a square yard, including 75 to 100 different arthropod species with specialized functions. Some feed on fungi, some on dead material, and some feed on each other. These little guys are barely visible to the naked eye. A half dozen of the larger ones could sit on the head of a pin like this turtle mite without being too crowded, but many are much smaller. Mites are everywhere, not just in the soil. An ounce of house dust in your home can hold up to 40,000. Other mites live on your skin, and some even keep your eyelashes clean. Finally, as organic material is broken down to finer particles, we have the sow bug, or woodlouse. Another keystone species that transforms organic matter down to a size that microorganisms can utilize and make available for plants. The soil is home for billions and billions of little critters. And when you walk through the woods, I want you to remember that each time you put your foot down, it is being held up on thousands of little backs, supported by several 100,000 legs. Another important concept about forest duff and litter is that it is extremely important to hydrologic function. How can 4 to 6 inches of water from a big storm move through saturated soils to streams without causing erosion? Mostly because forest litter has a high hydrologic conductivity, or a tremendous capacity to move large amounts of water. Also, forest duff and litter provides good structure at the soil litter interface, and this soil zone also has a huge capacity to move water without erosion. Without duff and litter, rill and gully erosion is likely to occur. So how can we reduce excess woody debris in the forest and still maintain the function of this forest floor? We can use equipment that does not move the surface soil and organic matter around, does not exert excessive pressure that reduces soil pore size, equipment with capabilities to reach out and grab logs and branches rather than driving over every inch of soil, equipment that allows us to be selective as to what and how much organic material is taken off the site, and we can use fire. In summary, some of the major effects of duff and litter: they modulate temperature and moisture, they are important in developing soil structure, they are important for hydrologic function, they are important in nutrient cycling, and they are habitat for soil micro and macrofauna. The third type of critter habitat is the well-decomposed humus, the end product of the decomposition process. The humus mixed with mineral soil makes fertile topsoil. The importance of this habitat component cannot be overemphasized. Humus has tremendous effects on physical and chemical soil properties, as well as providing biological habitat. Let's look at what some of this magical stuff does. Soil organic matter is an important source of nutrient reserves. It has a high cation exchange capacity, This is one measure of the soil's ability to hold plant nutrients and resist chemical change. It is important in the formation of soil structure, creates soil porosity, causes aggregate stability, and enhances water infiltration and retention. It provides habitat for soil organisms, and it is key to the sustainability of forest ecosystems. This soil is not providing all these benefits. This soil is alive. It is providing all the benefits we just mentioned. Much of the activity that takes place in the soil humus is microbial and carried out by microbes such as these bacteria. There can be 6 to 8 million bacteria in a gram of soil. A gram of soil is about the size of a pencil eraser. This gram might contain 16,000 different species of bacteria, all with specialized functions. There are many larger specialized soil organisms as well, such as this springtail. This organism gets its name from an appendage on its rear end, which is held under hydrostatic pressure until released, which causes it to spring away. The springtail is only 1/8 to 1/4 inch long, but it can catapult over a yard when in danger. A square meter of soil may contain as many as 50,000 springtails, representing 20 to 30 species. There are also many other species and many other critters that have adapted to the soil environment. Throughout the world, there are many species of earthworms. They eat dead plant material and move tremendous volumes of soil. They were once thought to be limited to grassland soils. Now we know there are species adapted to chaparral and forest ecosystems. Bioturbation is very important to ecosystem function. Bioturbation is the process of moving large volumes of soil as an indirect effect of burrowing. For example, in chaparral ecosystems, bioturbation mixes persistent seeds more deeply in the soil, assuring that whenever the moisture and temperature conditions or soil loss after a fire, there will be a seed bank of native plant species. Structure developed by soil organisms creates macropores. Pores are important for water movement and the balance of water and air. It is common to have as much as 50% of the soil volume occupied by empty space. Soil pores can be filled with water. Plant roots and soil critters need oxygen just as you and I do. In wetlands, the soil biota have evolved ways to still obtain oxygen. In western forests, prolonged saturated soils will kill the trees, critters, and fungi. Let's look at the typical nitrogen distribution in the soil of a mixed conifer forest. Many other nutrients have similar patterns. Large dead woody material has only a trace of the nitrogen. However, it is still important for the habitat it provides. The crown and the bole of living trees have about 5% each, which means that removing some of this material will not have a major effect on the total soil nitrogen. Litter contains about 10%, but note that the vast majority of nitrogen and other nutrients is in the soil, the major reserve, or the capital. This material must be mineralized or released by the soil biota before plants can use it. Let's take a closer look at the soil organic matter component. About 15% of the soil organic matter pool is called labile. This is organic matter that is readily available or usable by soil organisms. This material breaks down rapidly. Matter such as roots, decaying organisms, and feces, and turns over in 0 to 10 years. The bulk of soil organic matter, however, is recalcitrant. It is very resistant to decomposition. It is material that turns over very slowly, say 1,500 to 3,000 years. Looking at organic matter this way offers a new way to look at sustainability of forest ecosystems. The labile fraction can be used up and replaced frequently, or maintained at some level below climax forest levels, and still be sustainable. But if the management system causes a recalcitrant pool to be dipped into, this uses up capital and is not a sustainable system. What are some ways we can manage the forest without dipping into the recalcitrant pool and still retain sustainability? We can prepare sites for reforestation in ways that do not compact soils and leave ground cover on the soil surface. Leave some large woody material on the site and avoid disturbing some of the class 3 through 5 logs. use light prescribed fire, leaving some organic material on the soil surface. And when piling slash, we can select the material to pile. We can use thinning, shelter wood, and patch cut logging methods. And we can reduce chances for large hot fires by maintaining lower fuel levels. The information I presented here shows that ecosystems are complex, and Mother Nature makes trade-offs. So people should also make trade-offs for the good of the ecosystem. Many points on forest management are controversial, but let's not lock horns, holding out for our own special interests, but work together and learn from each other, preferably in the field, to provide solutions as interdisciplinary teams. In summary, soil habitat comes in three forms: large woody material, duff and litter, and soil organic matter. Organic matter can affect physical and chemical soil properties. Soil biota affects structure. Structure developed by critters affects soil hydrologic function. And soil organisms carry out biological processes critical to ecosystem function. Now let's revisit the questions I raised earlier. This is a healthy ecosystem. Although there is evidence of erosion at this disturbed site, general conditions in the ecosystem are such that organisms can become established and thrive. This is obviously not a healthy ecosystem. Much of the organic matter in the topsoil has been displaced or removed by both equipment and erosion. There is not sufficient ground cover to protect soil from erosion nor provide for nutrient replenishment. This ecosystem appears to be in poor condition, but on close examination, its vital signs are good. Soils are not compacted, soil organisms are thriving, and there is sufficient organic matter left for nutrient replenishment and organism habitat. This ecosystem appears healthy, but upon further examination, the vital signs are poor. Soils have been severely compacted, topsoil was removed, and little organic matter remains on the soil surface. Soil organisms and evidence of their activity are very limited. This site is using up organic matter and nutrients faster than they are being replenished for long-term soil productivity. In conclusion, remember that soils are the basis of a healthy ecosystem. Soil is a living system, and fertile topsoils are made up predominantly of all the organisms that live and die in the soil and their byproducts. These organisms depend on organic material for their livelihood.